a privilege to be here, everybody. I'm Kevin Jackson, and I am going to do a little talk on the future of AI in cybersecurity, why generative AI is not the whole story. And let me tell you, having to come up here and give this talk after some of the massive brains that have been up here in the last few hours is phenomenal, maybe a little unfair, but it's okay, because this is a different type of talk. I am not a data scientist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a CISO, and a virtual CISO. I'm a consultant. I'm a cybersecurity strategist. My background is very firmly not in the world of pure data mining, understanding LLMs, the amazing things you just saw. That presentation was phenomenal. It's not where I come from. I am a CISO, though, and I've been there for a long, long time. I'm a compliance guy. I'm a strategy guy. I'm a consultant. I'm a lot of DoD in my background, doing DoD consulting and compliance work, security architecture work, risk management framework, SSPs. Was talking to the Paramify guys earlier about SSPs. That's the world I come from on the government side. And on the commercial side, I've been the CISO of a large pharmaceutical company and done work in several other software development companies, cybersecurity management. And then for the past, 5 years or so, have spent a lot of time as a vCISO, bringing advisory services, advisory support to 40 or 50 organizations over the past few years. I've been in the technical side. I've been the IT manager, and I've done the, getting fiber pulled and trying to manage ports on a Cisco switch and having to figure out how in the world do these guys use PuTTY to do this. I've been that guy, didn't love it. Not really my cup of tea. So not that kind of talk. I've been that person, now I'm much more of a strategist. More recently, I'm a startup founder. I'm right now president, CEO, and founder of Level 6 Cybersecurity, which is a startup based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And we are building an AI cybersecurity advisory tool. And that topic, that's why I'm here tonight. I want to do something different than I think most of the talks have done this evening, and I think different than most of the ones you'll hear tomorrow, and it might get me in trouble. If you guys want to throw fruit, it's all good, as long as it's soft. I want to go further. I want to go way further. I'm not going to talk about the risks of AI. I'm not going to talk about security of using AI, LLMs, complex models, simple models. I want to stand here tonight and say, I think we need to go a lot further. And I think we should go further with what we're doing and how the future of how good tools can be used to support people like me, to support CISOs, to support cybersecurity decision makers. I want to go a lot further. So what I'm not going to talk about is the negatives, the downside, the risks. They're all there. It's not what this talk is about. I want to basically stand here tonight and say, I'm going to issue a challenge to those who are cybersecurity practitioners, particularly if you're strategists, if you're decision makers, if you manage constraints, because that's where I'm going with this talk, dealing with constraints, the kind of constraints that smack us cyber decision makers in the face every day. I want to issue a challenge that we need to be using the power of these tools in concert with one another to start addressing the really complex issues that we face in cybersecurity and getting us answers, getting us statistical, data-based answers to help us do our jobs better. I'm going to go way beyond where we are right now. Yes, there's risks. Yes, there's downsides. And I'm going to say this later. Yes, there are areas where bad guys could use these kinds of approaches to artificial intelligence to harm us. We got to manage all that as well. But I'm coming up here, this talk is on a fearless approach to saying we need to go and push further and use these tools to help us because we're struggling. Guys, CISOs are struggling big time. I was just having a conversation with Jeremy here, who's from Level 6 as well, about CISO turnover. I sent an email out to pretty close acquaintance who is the CISO of a large bank, top 15 bank in the country. Presented to him last year what we're doing at our startup. He liked it, he was excited, he was super busy. We were gonna catch up again in the summer, missed each other. Then he was out for a long stint on vacation, came back, we set a meeting. I reached out to him, gone. He lasted less than 18 months. Isn't the average 18 months for a CISO? for, even if you're not titled a CISO, for your cybersecurity manager? What's the turnover about? Because it's horrible. It's a horrible job. The strain, the stress, the contention, the blame. There is a problem here, and I think we need to use all of this awesomeness that we're talking about here this week to solve it. But it's not going to happen by mistake. It takes some intentionality. So, real quick, the agenda. I probably gave half the talk just in my intro. The rise of generative AI. I love generative AI. It's great. We're going to talk about why it's so great, but I'm not going to spend any time there because you guys already know. And the technical talks you've had have already explained all these things that I'm not even going to touch on that large language models can do. Beautiful. Awesome stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit how, and again, you guys know this if you're in cybersecurity at all, you know that machine learning algorithms and true basic AI data analytics tools have been in cybersecurity for a while. We're going to touch on that. We're going to talk about models, then we're going to talk about the symbiosis of complex models to do the things that I want done, to the things I think we need to be doing for the cybersecurity community, being helped into being born, bringing those into reality with the power of LLMs, the power of generative AI supporting them in a symbiotic relationship. We're going to talk about a good sci-fi future, and I'm going to get really nerdy, not surprising, and then we're going to wrap it up. Okay, a couple of quotes to kick off with. Lorraine Lee, senior partner from McKinsey. The analogy is similar to the move from mainframes to the personal computer, which anyone could use. That's generative AI, right? That's LLMs. The key point of my exposure, what I've learned about using ChatGPT or any of the other models, using LLMs period, is, man, they're easy to use. My developers in our startup, they love the fact that those suckers will check your code, they'll write your code, they'll do these things, and you don't have to be a data modeler, a data analyst, you don't have to be a data scientist, it's all done for you. The bar of entry is low. Jeff, how do you pronounce his name? Magankalda, CEO of Coursera. Is it perfect? No. Is it as good as my executive team? No. Is it really, really valuable, so valuable that I talk to ChatGPT almost every day? Yes. A lot of you that aren't people who actually can build your own LLMs, people like me who are users of actually those things for services, for helping our daily life, you get that, right? These are useful. They work. It works. And Bill Gates, kind of becoming a famous quote. I really love this one. Generative AI has the potential to change the world in ways that we can't even imagine. It's got the power to create new ideas, products, services that will make our lives easier, more productive, and more creative. But the follow on, it has the power to solve some of the world's biggest problems: climate change, poverty, and disease. This is the kind of stuff I want to talk about. Can we use these kind of technologies to actually help, if not solve, move us in the right direction for solving really big, complex problems at the insanely big level like that? I mean, he threw poverty out there. I mean, that's really out there. I'm not going to stay at that level. That's too much. But let's come down one level, right? Let's talk about information security, cybersecurity, or let's talk about medicine, or let's talk about financial markets. Scary one there. Or let's talk about climate change and climate modeling. Can't these tools be used? Can't the power of AI, generative AI with its powerful, powerful capabilities, and complex models be used to bring solutions to things that are this complex, where there's so much contention, where there are so many counteracting factors, where there's so much complexity? I think the answer is yes, but I don't think we're going to get there, as I said earlier. I don't think we're going to get there by mistake. I think we're going to have to intentionally be aware of the fact that we need to use, with great power comes great responsibility. I'm Spider-Man. We need to use these powers intentionally to solve big problems. So, a quick slide I'm not going to spend much time on. The history of AI and machine learning and cybersecurity, it's not new. 2010, I was managing a Barracuda spam filter and some other tools in some racks in a place I was working. And I remember then thinking, oh wow, this thing is using a Bayesian model to detect spam and phishing emails. I'll be darned. It's actually got a core little learning algorithm it's using, and it works. And I can see, how many data points it's taken in, and you can clear the cache, and you can clear all that it's learned from, and you can see how it works, and it's great. And then I looked it up, and I was like, I'll be darned, look at that. 14 years ago, and yeah, all over the place in cybersecurity, basic machine learning approaches have been used all the time. Transaction monitoring, insider threat activity, risk analysis, places where you're looking for outliers, correlations, and you're learning patterns, right? All of these systems excel, long before there was anything like a large language model, at modeling simple reality and detecting trends, detecting outliers, giving alerts. In our SIM tools, again, I'm in the cybersecurity world here. I'm not in the LLM world. So I'm looking at my SIM or my SIM as a service or my, whatever I'm using for my homemade SIM. I built something on the Elk stack, and you use that kind of technology always. That's what it's for, being able to take massive amounts of alerts, do the correlations. No human can do all that. And you want it to learn, you want it to build on itself. So there's been machine learning in cyber for a long time, in narrow silos, in functional areas, in specific domains, in vulnerability management nowadays. You see it in vulnerability management tools. Certainly in data governance tools, which connect to data traceability, data tracing, data leaks, alerting, identity and access management tools, identity threat detection and response, those kinds of tools. They're using some level of machine learning algorithms and modeling to do what they do better, right? And this is not new. It's been around for a while. Yeah, and I don't really need to talk on this slide. I already covered it. But the idea is, they work. We know it's useful. These tools do what they do for us. They're narrow. They're small. Now, analytic models, these models that drive them, and I want to lean into complex models. And what I mean by complexity, and again, I'm not a data scientist, and I do not play one on TV. What I mean by complexity are models that manage constraints and that model constraints in a large scale. So, for example, and I'm going to just start in cybersecurity because that's where I'm comfortable. If you're managing a cybersecurity program, those of you who have been to project management school, you know what the triple constraint is, right? Triple constraint is time, scope, money. The constraints that bound what you do and can't do, where you need to go and how you operate in order to, in our case as CISOs, keep the organization safe. The constraints are incredibly high pressure. They're incredibly measurable, but there's a million different dimensions to that field of constraints. You absolutely have the high-level constraints of budget and of time, and related to time, personnel, right? Those are at the high level. But you also have these constraints of technology types and network types and tool sets and the choices you make for insourcing versus outsourcing and cadence of operations, all which drive into time, personnel, money. These constraints, always at loggerheads, right, in what you can or can't do. What does that lead us to? The goal in managing a cybersecurity program, yes, it's to keep an organization secure, but it's not a secure in a vacuum ideal. It can't be. What you really do if you manage a cybersecurity program is you're constantly trying to optimize. You're constantly trying to optimize because of your constraints. You're trying to do the most good you can do protectively, defensively for your organization, given your constraints. Why is that not a perfect target for analytic modeling? Very complex analytic models. Honestly, I think it's a really good one. There's a reason why there's not a ton of analytic models out there that are tackling these massive, complex, constraint-ridden domains like cybersecurity. There's not a lot of them out there. So the role of analytic models, I want to dig a little deeper. Why do I bring up that optimization word? I have up here, what you model, you can optimize. What you model, you can analyze. What you model, you can predict. Yes, I'm going to talk about predictive analytics in this talk a little bit. I want to go there. I want to get to the future. I want science fiction, you guys. I want my model to be able to tell me all kinds of amazing things that are customized to me, that are live, that use real data, that can tell me how, what the confidence level of the analytics are, that I can use to make decisions on, given my constraints. Now, that kind of stuff exists right now, right? There are models like that in medicine. There's some in environmental science. We need more. There's a ton of those in finance. Astrophysics, there's a ton of those kinds of models. We certainly need more. Cybersecurity, there's not enough. There's not enough. What are the barriers to having these kinds of models put in place? Well, you've got to be a data scientist. You've got to be a data scientist to model this massive set of variables in any of these areas. I mean, again, if you're going to try to tackle a true global climate model, and there's a bunch out there, but if you're going to try to get one that's more and more advanced, all of the variables, they're enormous. When you're attacking something like medicine, if you're going to try to model viruses, infections, and allow that to be able to be adjusted to the characteristics of the person, their genetic makeup, their age, their blood type, all the other factors that could be put in, so that you can get recommendations out, answers, and optimize because of all the constraints. We can do that, but you've got to have a brain the size of the guys who were up here earlier to tackle those kinds of problems. And then when you do, here's the problem. To use those kinds of models, that's a high bar of entry. You've got to understand so much. And the rank and file user who may be able to benefit from them, again, in the cybersecurity space, the CISO who's not a data scientist, who's not a data modeler, but wants the benefit, there's a disconnect of sorts here. You've got to be one of these gigantic brains to really understand how these models are working and understand the constraints and the ins and outs and the variables and the cost models and the losses and the breach data and this and that and the other. That has always been a barrier to making this kind of a future, this kind of a science fiction future where we're modeling complex realities to make those realistic. To put it more simply, large language models and all the generative AI tools that are out there, which I'm not an expert on. Have I said that enough times? I really had to hammer that home. They're data focused. Boy, are they easy to use. And they're easy access. You're typing in a text box, you're talking into a microphone, and you're getting work done. You're getting results. You're getting analytics. You're getting correlations. You're getting guidance. And you don't have to be a data scientist to do it. On the other side, these complex models that I'm talking about, descriptive and predictive analytics, managing extraordinarily constrained, hyperdimensional reality. That's tough. That's hard stuff. It also has a really high bar of entry. Marrying the two is where I want to go with this. The reason we titled this talk that the future is more than just generative AI, it's not to put down LLMs and generative AI. Those tools are unbelievable. They're insane. But I want to take the amazing low bar of entry, incredible efficiency, ease of use, powerful access, and ability to create from LLMs and generative AI capabilities and marry those with better and more of these complex models that are actually going to model reality based on real-world data. And we don't have enough of those complex models. We need more of those. We need a lot more of those. And that's going to be, in a few slides, the challenge I want to give to everybody here, because it's people like us in cybersecurity and in the other disciplines we mentioned that have to very proactively decide, you know what, we do need to start looking at it. We've got to make this happen. We've got to support these organizations. We've got to start capturing what the parameters are. When we parameterize reality, when we look at what the constraints are, when we try to identify metrics, we identify ways to gather data to massively collect so that we can feed an analytic model that's doing one of these really complex sets of constraints. That's work that I don't think enough of it's being done right now. I'm hoping I'm wrong in some of those other fields, but I know I'm not wrong in cybersecurity because we built one of the first ones. And every place we've gone, people are like, oh, we've never heard of that before. And I'm like, well, I know. Well, you should have. We need this kind of functionality. So the idea is a symbiosis, combining the efficiency and the power of generative AI with the robustness of new complex analytic models, descriptive and predictive models that are going to be hard as all get out to create, but that we could do. You know, the capabilities, the cloud-based capabilities, the GPUs, the flexibility, the scalability, all that we have that drives the creation, that's allowed the creation of these large language models, those same capabilities also help the data scientists that are back there in the dark rooms, you know, with the really thick glasses on, that are doing the work to create these complex models and that we want more of to keep doing it. It benefits them as well. The actual development of these, you know, reality simulations, that work is just as much benefited by all the tech and all the access and the lower cost and the scalability as LLMs are. Is the work being done to create those complex models, those constraint-focused models? That's where I think we need to go. So let me give a quick example. And first, a little caveat with this diagram. I'm showing, on the left, end users, and I'm showing them interacting with a generative AI interface of some kind. It's a text box, it's voice, it's beautiful. Then, through some sort of an interchange, I'm showing a subject-specific complex model there on the right, okay? Of course, training data galore is used to keep those large language models increasing in their power and their capability. The same kind of data is needed over in that subject-specific complex model on the far right. I call that subject data. It's still training data, but it's data needed to feed that complex constraint model that's in there. So here's an example. Again, cybersecurity strategy, basic strategy decisions. Think about, if any of you are here understand kind of the day-to-day struggle of looking at what I'm going to do, how I'm going to organize, how I'm going to manage a cybersecurity program for a typical upper mid-market enterprise, right? You never have enough budget, you never have enough people, and if you're an audited or a publicly traded organization, or you're SOC 2, Type 2 that you do annually, or you're NIST compliant, or Lord help you if you're international and you do GDPR and you're ISO compliant as well and you get an ISO certification, or if you are in fintech and you've got all of the financial rules of FINRA and the SEC breathing down your neck. All of those things, right? They're all coming at you. What's the answer to your cybersecurity program? The answer is the same. Every CISO has the same answer they get for how to keep their organization safe. You know what it is? Do everything now and do it perfectly. That's the answer. Mr. CISO, here's all the things the standards say, do them all. And here's all the compliance things, you better be doing them all. And do everything at once and do it all perfectly. And we'll be secure then, right? We're not going to get breached. If we do that, says the CEO, says the board, and the CISO says, God, no, that's not true. No, they can't say that. They say we are lowering our risk. And then the board says, you doubled your budget twice in the past 3 years. Is this actually worth it? Is this working? And then what happens? A breach happens. Multiple breaches happen. Happens all the time. A breach, lost, a data leak, someone clicked on the link, ransomware, CISO's gone. Now, I'm not saying he got fired. Luckily, that's getting a little more rare. No, he's stressed out, and so he left. He's gone. He's going to go look for something else because he knows that his work that he's been doing, having to try to do everything at once with limited resources and people, time, and money, is a losing battle. And he knows that the high-level decisions were all him. The standards don't tell you and force him how often you do your cadence of operations of the critical functions, do they? The standards don't say what the optimal choices are for how often you train, or what the right window is for patch management on your critical servers versus your non-critical servers, so that you can kind of play that zero-day game, but don't play it too closely, and then again, so much risk because you patch and you destroy a bunch of things and we're in trouble. And critical functions aren't happening. And then there's the 17 ancient servers we still have running because one of our manufacturing plants has to have some Windows XP machines keeping XYZ machine going. And if any of you guys ever worked around manufacturing, you know that's still a thing. It very much still is a thing. All those constraints, all that risk, all that mess, and then bad things happen, and it's like, wow, okay, what am I going to do? That world, that CISO world of do everything now is unreasonable. We need to help the CISOs out there, guys. Those decisions about how much, when, how much security for the cost, what to insource, what to outsource, what compliances and what ways to manage different compliances, how to structure roles and responsibilities, how much of the controls and in what way in identity and access management, how much and what type of data governance and at what cost, how we're doing incident response, how we're doing secure application development, how we're doing business continuity in a secure way. I could go through all the other domains. Those things aren't prescriptive. He's using consultants, narrow fields of view, but better than just him, to get some advice. He's going to conferences like this. He's praying that smart people will talk at the conferences so we get some good advice on these things. But in the end, he has to just make those choices. What are they based on? Are they based on data? Are they based on analytics? Nope. So look at this model on the screen. Why do we not have a subject-specific analytic model, and maybe that subject is just identity and access management? Why can't we model the constraints of managing identity and access management for a mid-size or a large organization, look at the strategic approaches at a high level, look at the costs associated with implementing those strategic approaches for a company in that industry of that size, with that kind of a profile, that's a nonprofit or not, that's got this many subsidiaries, that has this many headcount of end users. We can get that data, right? What if we modeled all of those decisions versus what actually happens in the real world in terms of success or failure rates? Hard to come by, but they're out there, especially as disclosure gets more and more powerful and more prominent, so that we can run the constraint analysis, run the correlation analyses to see what decisions actually are optimal for that specific organization based on those factors. All of a sudden, the CISO doesn't have to go and say, well, this is what we felt was the best idea, or these were the decisions we made and it's based on consultant X who we fired last month. He's got analytics on his side, an optimizing model. How about a continually optimized model that's always taking in new data from the real world as things fail and as things succeed, as certain approaches work and they don't, that looks at the cost benefit, the cost of defensive strategies versus the cost of failures, and compares like you do in a FAIR model. FAIR kind of touches on this. If any of you guys are familiar with the FAIR model or cyber risk quantification, they try to get there, right? They're trying to create quantified metrics for risk so you can look at dollars. The problem is FAIR is based on estimates. You kind of do the typical risk calculation of likelihood versus impact. Well, how about we use data? Why don't we use data from the real world, literally historical data, but not old, continually taking in real world data on what works and what doesn't. We know what it costs. We can parameterize those decisions. We can parameterize the costs. We can constantly update them, and we can make it a learning model. That's a complex model. Even at its most simple state, that's a complex model. What if that subject-specific model is doing that? And then, so that he doesn't have to figure out how to manage 500 parameters in the model, we marry that with him being able to go, turn on his microphone, and say, excuse me, Mr. Complex Model Tool for Cybersecurity, tell me, given where we are right now in our current state, what are the next 5 optimal decisions I need to make right now? And let the tool give them the recommendations. Does that mean they're going to be 100% right? No, but they're based on analytics, got a certain level of confidence associated with them. They can be predictive in nature, but maybe more importantly, when he goes to meet with the board, guess what he gets to do? He gets to say, this is not me putting my finger in the wind. This is from the analytics, because the cybersecurity community came together and have modeled all of these constraints. And he gets to use it constantly and easily because it's got a generative AI front end. So it can generate for him recommendations, answers, documentation, policies and procedures. What if you had constantly optimized living contract policies and procedures where the choices, iterative over time, adapt themselves to the realities of what's happening in the real world, what actually is working best at any given moment in time? You wouldn't want to change them every day, but over the course of a year, as tech changes, as new threats arise, as the world changes as new breach trends kick in, how great would that be? How would that not change that CISO's world if, for a change, he's getting support in how he runs his cybersecurity program from analytics and can do so in a very instantly achievable, dynamic, natural language query, natural language response manner. Then we take it to the next level, that multi-model framework. No CISO just manages identity and access management. What if we're modeling all of those key areas? And it's a system of systems of models, cross-linked, interlinked, that talk to each other, that are all still using the data from the world, intentionally gathered, parameterized, managed. Use open sources. Doesn't have to be anybody's private data. Open source intelligence. OSINT, I still firmly believe, OSINT is so much of the future. There's so much out there, especially in the world of cybersecurity. The breach reporting, the 8Ks and 10Ks, the legal filings, they're all one thing. But then you get into what social media does, all the feeds that are constantly monitoring the dark web on exactly what the bad guys are posting that they've done, that they've succeeded at. It's enormous. It's enormous. There's a lot of data out there. There was a talk I went to, I think it was last year for ISACA, or maybe it was 2 years ago now, down in New Orleans. Keynote speaker on the big night of the conference, her whole topic was, data's not what you think it is. Data's everywhere. Everything is data. And if we intentionally treat reality that way and start parameterizing everything, we can blow away what we now consider to be big data. I loved that talk. It was amazing. In fact, her name was Dr. Poppy Crum. Amazing talk. Data is everywhere. We embraced that big time at our little startup. If we really embrace these really difficult problems and take the time and make the effort to build these subject-specific, large-scale, multi-model frameworks and use them to bring the answers, I guess you kind of notice I'm really leaning in on the answers here. I want the answers, and I want data-based answers, and I want easy access to them, and I want them all the time. And I want them in cyber, and I want them in medicine, I want them in climate change. I'm not reaching up to Bill Gates in poverty yet. I don't know how you model that, but I can model cybersecurity decisions strategically. Huge lift to get tactical. We could do that. Why are we not basing these things, if at the very least, if not so that the CISO has a leg to stand on, has analytics backing him up on what is worth doing, what has the most ROI, what has the best cost-benefit ratio based on real-world data. The fact that we haven't done that yet until now is crazy. It's not fair, and it's why a lot of CISOs are burned out. Multi-model frameworks, big-time complexity, so usable thanks to LLMs being in the world. So, I know I'm running out of time. The path to a good sci-fi future. Okay, I really want to push this, guys. I want us to go far with this. And again, I'm not going to mention the risks, not exactly. By saying that, I already mentioned it. You're thinking of them yourself. Everybody knows the risk, right? If you build these kinds of models for good, obviously they could be misused. So I'm going to leave it to the other guys in the room, the pen testers and the guys who break LLMs, who preceded me. Those guys can figure out how we're going to protect all this. But I want the answers. I want that good sci-fi future. I want to be able to know that I've got models out there that can manage my ridiculous constraints and can give me constantly improving, constantly learning recommendations, answers, guidance that I can bring to my process. And they don't need to do it for me. I'm not talking about them replacing me, but they can give me what I need most if someone takes the time to build those models. If someone takes the time to do the parameterization of reality, it's building a simulation. I'm stopping short of the matrix here. It's building a simulation, right, that can give real results that we can then run with. So the analogy that I first came up with when I thought about, when I started teaching as an adjunct in 2017 at Villanova University, teaching business intelligence classes. Loved it, because I had a lot of exposure to BI and data warehousing, and large-scale BI programs over the years when I was a Booz Allen Hamilton guy, and decided I wanted to get more into it. There's no better way to learn than teaching, right? So I started teaching Villanova their continuing education classes in BI program management. One of the main things we were teaching that was a big part of the curriculum was, as it's 2017, it's like the future is going to be dominated by natural language query, natural language response technologies. They weren't called LLMs or generative AI back then, at least wasn't in our curriculum. And I rewrote the curriculum and I didn't change it. But natural language query, natural language response, that's the future of business intelligence. That's the future of humans interacting with data analytics. And there were several parts of the classes we taught where we just really honed in on that. And I think years go by, and we've launched our startup, we're building cybersecurity tools like the type we're talking about. And I realized, this all came to reality. It was all coming to reality while we were teaching about it. It was percolating for this last decade or more. And it's all about that natural interaction. And then it hit me. It's like, wait a minute. I just had this vision, right, of, again, I'm a true nerd, Lieutenant Commander Data. Star Trek. I pictured Lieutenant Commander Data, and I thought, Data, he's great. He's AGI, right? He's artificial general intelligence. Data was truly a humanoid. Not exactly what I'm talking about here at all, but Data, what was so great about interacting with Data? Well, it's natural language. It's natural language query and response. You talk to him like he's a person. And I thought, well, I'll be darned, yeah, that's kind of the point, isn't it? That's that whole structure. Data was the first true AGI modeled in the sci-fi world for all of us who were really into it in the 90s. We're just loving that because what could you do? You can interact naturally with a source of tremendous amounts of data. Now, the computer on the enterprise was pretty good too. Obviously, no data. It didn't have the benefit of the designer that data had. But the idea of natural language is amazing. And you add on to that generative capabilities, phenomenal. We bring this into the question because a good sci-fi future with these kinds of capabilities, is it in reach? Could it be done? Can we get there? Can we mitigate enough of the negatives that we can get there? I think we can. But the whole point of what I'm saying is it's not going to happen by accident. And it won't happen by only focusing on how we manage the natural language query and response. We've also got to tackle these really big constraint models. And that is no light lift. And the big brains have to do that. But they can do it, especially if we ask them to, especially if we fund them to, especially if the demand is there. It's not going to be an accidental thing. So, the roles we can all play, and this is kind of the last two slides here. I think as a cybersecurity community, and I'm going to be just banging this drum all year long in multiple talks, like we need to be pushing the world of analytics. We need to be pushing the standards bodies, the forums, the meeting groups. We need to be talking to the data analysts, the data modelers, and the data scientists to get there, to get the progress started and to drive this so that all the work that, like the folks in this room who are LLM experts are doing, can be symbiotically improving together so that this mesh, this merger of the two can occur. In those diagrams, you saw I showed them as kind of separate gears, separate items. That's not really true. This is going to merge. There's going to be a merger, right, where the models themselves include really powerful, complex models, constraint-driven models that can give real answers and have generative AI capabilities and natural language query and response all in one package. But I think we're going to have to focus on it to get there. I say let the progress continue, but I'm still afraid there's not enough progress being made when it comes to those constraint models. So in a way, if I were to assign homework for everyone when you go back to your workaday world, is to consider what in your area, and again, this is a cybersecurity conference, what are the things that you would love to have answers about based on data that you don't have right now? What I have on here, literally mine. Like, I want to know about vulnerabilities. I don't want to know that they exist. I know they exist. I want to know what the optimal approach is to patching in every category, in every type, and of every style, And I want that relative to the threats, which we can model, right? Tons of good threat models are out there that are live and active and using real-world data. MITRE ATT&CK started that forever ago. Their whole model is based on tracking what's really happening in the world. I want to know what I need to do in a given moment in time for my vulnerability approach, for my patching, and for my lack of patching, and for what I do and when I do it and why. Optimized. I want to know about my overall investments, my investment portfolio, what I'm spending, people, tools, operations, staffing. I want to know exactly. I won't say exactly. I want to know with a sufficient level of confidence what I should be as a manufacturer who builds landing gear, mostly for the Air Force and for a few commercial organizations, in this region of the country with this many employees, with this kind of a tech stack, on and on and on and on. What should I be outsourcing? In what categories? Based on what actually is working out there. And what should be insourced? What should be hybrid? What should I be having in the cloud? What should be on-prem? These are not really complex topics, right? We're not talking about the really deep details of internal to the servers or the network and all of that. We're talking about the big picture things that every CISO has to make decisions on. We can model these things. There's going to be an optimal point. There will be an optimization level for those kinds of decisions, but nobody's looking at what it might be. That's what I want to know. And I put cybersecurity program overall. Threats, I already touched on that. We should be asking ourselves these questions and intentionally driving towards modeling or getting people to build the models to begin to give us solutions that take into account all the constraints and that deliver in a very absorbable, easy access way, thanks to large language models and all they can generate, all the things we need to succeed as cybersecurity decision makers. That is where I think we need to be. And then take it even further, of course. I do want to go to the Bill Gates level. I just don't know how to get there. But cybersecurity, and I forgot to mention in closing, related to cybersecurity, why aren't we also modeling privacy management? Approaches to managing privacy. Privacy is a big deal, especially if you're international, growing so here in the United States. There's 1,000 different decisions you can make on how you go about tracking, monitoring, protecting, governing privacy of data. It ties closely to data governance itself. How you're going about data governance, how you're doing data classification, how you're doing data protection, how you're doing retention, how you're doing tracking, lineage, all those questions. Why the heck are we not modeling these things? Because we're getting results. 2 million companies in the world are doing data governance right now, and they're getting varying results. If we're intentional about it, what if we anonymously shared these approaches and these results so that we can model optimal? Privacy management is just one of many. What about vendor management, third-party risk? How many ways are there to go about that? There's going to be an optimal point. How many millions of constraints might there be in how you attack vendor management? There's going to be an optimization point. It may be specific to an industry, a sector, type, size. Let's find out. How about diversity, equity, and inclusion? How about ESG? Those things are costing companies money. It's constraints, right? Even in those areas, there needs to be a cost-benefit analysis done. Companies don't want to just throw endless money away on an ESG program. It can benefit the organization. How about we find out what choices for a given organization, what approaches, what strategies are optimal to get the best results to the stock price, to the org, to the world? All of the things that matter. We can model these things if we do, if we're intentional about it. I meant to mention all this in the earlier slide. So there's just a lot out there that's just within the realm of maybe GRC that we could be tackling, that we should be tackling. And then, of course, all the bigger topics. Thank God I'm not having to try to attack those. But the bigger things are out there, too. That is my challenge to everybody. And that's it. Thank you, guys.